A new release of the Twitter files has just come out from journalist Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi is also the journalist who, along with the Michael Schellenberger, testified before the House in a widely seen hearing. And this one is a really important one. It's called the Censorship Industrial Complex. I looked in the New York Times and a couple of other major newspapers to see the coverage of this Twitter files. No coverage at all, no mention of it. And so that in itself is very telling. And I think the reason is that the New York Times, along with a number of other news organizations, are part unbelievably of this censorship industrial complex. Now, Taibbi goes on to talk about how there is this censorship system, a kind of octopus that involves the government, but it also involves industry leaders, it involves nonprofits. And this is not just a case where these people all sort of toss in suggestions to Twitter or to Facebook or to Google. There's a formal system of meetings and a formal portals established for thousands, long lists of people to be reported, and for spreadsheets of thousands and cumulatively hundreds of thousands of names. One of these groups takes credit for getting nearly 22 million tweets labeled in the run-up to the 2020 election. So we're talking about a massive censorship operation, one that is really quite unprecedented. Even in the days of Soviet censorship, it's not clear that censorship had this kind of reach, in part perhaps because of the limits of technology. One can assume that Chinese have a censorship program that rivals or exceeds this, but we are now close to the top of the list. Taibbi points out a couple of really telling things. One is that a bunch of YouTube videos are flagged for, quote, anti-Ukraine narratives. This is important because the claim is not that the tweets are wrong or that they are false or that they are somehow Russian disinformation or even misinformation. The tweets are merely flagged because they seem to be critical of the Ukraine government. So nothing could be more outrageous in terms of suppressing free speech. You're just suppressing an opinion because it goes against the Biden regime's narrative. Taibbi points out that you've got all these NGOs involved. Now, NGOs traditionally were non-governmental organizations that were supposed to keep an eye on government. They were supposed to act as a check on government, but now they act as partners with government in suppressing speech. And who are the main malefactors? The National Endowment for Democracy, the Atlantic Council's DFR Lab, and the so-called Alliance for Securing Democracy. All of these people come together as, quote, Taibbi calls it one team in the great effort to silence domestic opponents. All of this started when the Aspen Institute had a kind of conference, a confab. And by the way, again, the Aspen Institute gets millions of dollars from the government. So do a lot of these other nonprofits. So even though we think of them as independent from government, they are fed by the government and they are often asked by the government to do the government's bidding. And they constitute, along with the private, so the private and public sector constitutes a, quote, incestuous, self-appointed truth squad. Very often the same people are moving from law enforcement intelligence to the private sector, back to law enforcement, back to the intelligence sector. And these are the people who think they are somehow the guardians of democracy. The Stanford Internet Observatory, which is one of the big offenders, SIO so-called, these are people that work with tech partners. They call them tech partners, like, hey, we're partnering with these groups. But what they mean is that we are in cahoots with them in suppressing First Amendment rights. And the tech partners are Google, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. And what they try to do is flag posts, remove them, reduce them, or have notices or warnings on them. In one remarkable email, you see that they are trying to suppress what? Well, not just disinformation, but, quote, stories of true vaccine side effects. I want to highlight the word true. And then, quote, true posts which could fuel hesitancy. So it doesn't matter in this case that the post is accurate. Yeah, I took the vaccine and yeah, this is what happened to me. But nevertheless, suppress this guy because we don't want people saying things like that, even though they're accurate. And number two, if you have a true post that, let's say, refers to a study that says the vaccines don't work that well, true posts which could fuel hesitancy. So the post is measured not by its accuracy or inaccuracy. It's measured by what is the likely effect. And if the likely effect is to fuel hesitancy, it makes people, I don't really know if I want to take this vaccine, even though there may be good reason for that belief. And even though you're reading something that is in and of itself accurate, they nevertheless want to shut you down.